All right, so you lead a sales team and want to see them crush it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, stick with us for this deep dive. We're going to unpack some fascinating research suggesting that better communication is the secret weapon for inside sales.
It's more than just like generic tips, right?
Exactly. We're going deep, deep into something called speech accommodation theory. It's all about how people adjust their communication style to match whoever they're talking to. And we've got some awesome research from Joe R. Downing in the Journal of Business Communication.
Yeah. Plus, a Cornell University study that shows just how big of an impact this can have on a team like yours.
So let's bring in the expert to break this down for us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so speech accommodation theory.
Hmm?
How does this actually play out in real life inside sales?
Okay, picture this. Your agent's on the phone with a customer who's super energetic, talking a mile a minute. If the agent can mirror that style, they'll click instantly and the customer feels heard.
Makes sense? But what about those customers who are more, laid back?
Exactly. If the customer is more reserved, the agent can slow down their pace, adjust their tone, and create a more relaxed vibe. It's about building trust and rapport, no matter the customer's personality.
I see. So it's like reading the room, but over the phone?
Yeah, it's all about creating a sense of synchrony, like you're on the same wavelength.
But doesn't that require a lot from the agents?
Hmm.
Like being super aware and adaptable?
You're right, it does. It's not about being fake or putting on an act. It's about being tuned into the customer style and making subtle adjustments to create a smooth and natural conversation.
So like mirroring things like pace, tone, even specific words.
Absolutely. It's almost like the agent becomes a communication chameleon, blending in with the customer. But, and this is key, it has to be genuine.
Oh, for sure. No one wants to feel like they're being manipulated.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, Downing's research found that high-performing inside sales agents, they kind of do this naturally.
Oh, wow. So it's almost like an instinct.
It seems that way, and it's a big part of what makes them so successful. So let's dig into his research a bit. What stood out to you?
Well, one thing that really caught my eye was how much emphasis he put on vocal variety. Top performers didn't just speak in a monotone, they used changes in their pitch and volume to emphasize key points.
And to show their enthusiasm, it makes a huge difference, especially when you don't have those visual cues you get in person.
Right, because it's like listening to a great storyteller. They use their voice to keep you engaged and hanging on every word.
Exactly. And top-performing inside sales agents do the same. They use their voice as a powerful tool to connect with the customer and make the message resonate.
It's like they're vocal athletes,
Yeah.
carefully controlling their tone and pace to achieve a specific effect.
I like that. But there's another surprising finding from Downing's work. He observed that these top performers, they weren't afraid to strategically interrupt the customer.
Hold on, interrupt.
If you
Isn't that like a cardinal sin in sales?
You'd think so, right? But hear me out. Downing's research suggests that a well-placed interruption, one that's done thoughtfully and sparingly, can show you're actively listening and engaged. It shows you're processing what the customer's saying and eager to respond.
Okay, but how do you know when it's a well-placed interruption and not just being rude? It seems like a fine line to walk.
It all comes down to reading the customer's cues. Like, if they pause after making a really important point, a quick interjection like, "I understand that's a major concern for you," can build rapport and show empathy.
Okay, so it's not about cutting them off mid-sentence.
No, of course not. Constantly interrupting would be a disaster. It's all about balance and being sensitive to the flow of the conversation.
Which brings us back to that adaptability we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
The agent needs to be super tuned in to the customer style and know when an interruption might be appropriate.
Absolutely. And this is where active listening comes in. Downing's research found that top-performing agents weren't just passively listening. They actively acknowledged and paraphrased what the customer was saying.
Active listening, a classic sales technique. But what were these top agents doing that set them apart? Can you give us some specifics?
They didn't just summarize what the customer said, they went deeper. For example, if a customer was frustrated about a past experience, instead of jumping straight into a solution, these agents would say something like, "I can hear how frustrating that must have been for you. Let's see how we can make sure that doesn't happen again."
Wow, so they're acknowledging the emotions behind the words, not just the words themselves. That's powerful.
And you know what? The research found that these top-performing agents, the ones who consistently did all of this mirroring, vocal variety, strategic interruption, and active listening, they generated a whopping 38% of total sales revenue.
38%, that's huge.
Yeah.
It really proves that these aren't just soft skills. They have a real impact on the bottom line.
Exactly. Investing in communication training for your inside sales team can have a massive payoff. These skills are a game changer.
You've given me a lot to think about already. How can I actually take all this and apply it to my team's training?
Let's dive into that next. We'll explore some practical takeaways from Downing's research and see how you can unlock your team's full communication potential. So we've uncovered these really effective communication techniques that these top inside sales agents are using. But how can sales leaders like yourself actually put this knowledge into practice?
Right. Because that's the million-dollar question.
Absolutely.
I'm all about actionable strategies.
Yeah. And one of the first things Downing emphasizes is targeted coaching.
Okay.
It's not enough to just, tell your team, hey, be good communicators. You need to really break down these techniques.
It's specific.
Yeah, mirroring vocal variety, strategic interruption, active listening, and give them concrete examples of how to actually use these things in real sales conversations.
So it's like going beyond those general communication workshops and getting really specific with the research-backed techniques.
Exactly. And it's kind of like, imagine a basketball coach telling their players to just shoot better.
Yeah.
It doesn't really help them. Instead, they break down the mechanics of a jump shot, give them drills to practice, and then give feedback on how they execute those techniques. It's the same with communication.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So instead of saying be a better listener, I could coach my team on how to paraphrase effectively or ask clarifying questions to show they really get what the customer needs.
Exactly. And here's where technology can be a huge help.
Okay.
Call recordings.
Oh, yeah.
They're a goldmine for coaching.
I've used them for quality assurance, but not really as a coaching tool.
Think about it. You can listen to calls with your team point out where they did a great job mirroring a customer's style or using vocal variety. You can also see where they could have used strategic interruption or maybe deepen their active listening. It's like watching game film and giving them feedback.
So real-time, actionable feedback.
Exactly, based on actual customer interactions.
I can see how that would be way more impactful than just, hypothetical scenarios.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to make these skills even more real role-playing is super valuable.
Oh, yeah, role play.
Create some scenarios where your team can practice adapting to different customer personalities and try out vocal variety and strategic interruption in a safe space.
It can feel a little forced sometimes,
Yeah.
but I get how helpful it is for building confidence.
Yeah, and it's about creating a culture of continuous learning and improvement.
For sure.
And remember, it's not just about identifying areas for improvement.
Right.
It's just as important to celebrate when they do use these techniques well.
Oh, absolutely. Recognition is key.
Yeah, highlight examples of great communication during team meetings, or even include these skills in performance reviews.
Love that. Showing them that you value these skills.
Exactly.
And that they really do impact success.
It's about changing the mindset from thinking of communication as a soft skill to seeing it as a core competency.
Yeah, weaving it into the fabric of your sales culture.
Exactly. And lastly, you got to measure the impact of what you're doing. Don't just rely on anecdotal evidence. Track things like conversion rates, average deal size, customer satisfaction scores before and after you implement this communication training.
The data tells the story.
It does. It shows the ROI of this training and why it's so important.
This has been so helpful. But before we move on, you mentioned earlier that Downing's research challenged some traditional sales assumptions.
Oh, yeah.
Can you give some examples?
One of the most surprising was that speaking too quickly can actually hurt sales.
Really?
While it's good to be clear and concise, information overload can overwhelm customers.
Huh. I always thought faster talkers sounded more knowledgeable.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking that might not be true.
It's about finding that balance between being articulate and giving the customer time to process.
Makes sense.
What else? Another assumption he challenged was that being super polite is always the best approach.
Really? Because I've always stressed politeness.
Politeness is important, for sure, but Downing found that sometimes a little assertiveness used the right way can be more effective.
Interesting. So how can assertiveness be used well in sales?
For example, if a customer is hesitant to information about a politely assertive statement like, based on what we've talked about, it seems like the solution would really help you. What are your thoughts on moving forward? Can help them make a decision.
Okay, so guiding the conversation but still being respectful.
Exactly. And this goes back to adapting to the customer. Some people respond well to a direct approach. Others need a gentler touch.
So like that communication chameleon we talked about.
Exactly. This whole conversation has been eye-opening.
It really has. I'm looking at my team's communication in a whole new way.
And remember, we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore with speech accommodation theory and its impact on inside sales.
I'm ready to go deeper.
Mm.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about specific techniques and how sales leaders can put all this knowledge into practice. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, that emotional side of inside sales.
Yeah, it's a huge factor that often gets overlooked. Inside sales agents, they face unique challenges, dealing with rejection all the time, talking to frustrated, sometimes even angry customers. It's a lot of pressure, and it can really impact their well-being.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers, the targets, and forget that there are real people dealing with all that pressure.
Right, and that's where that Cornell study comes in. You know, the one we mentioned earlier. It found that the annual turnover rate for inside sales agents is a crazy 20%.
Wow, that's high.
Yeah, and think about the cost of replacing each agent. It's basically a whole year's salary. Creating a supportive work environment, one where they feel understood and valued, that's not just about being nice. It's a smart business move.
So you're saying that investing in my team's well-being will actually help my bottom line?
It's a win-win, really. Happier employees, lower turnover, and ultimately a more successful business.
I like the sound of that.
Plus, there's another layer to this. Research shows that when employees are happy, customers are happier too.
So my team's well-being directly impacts customer satisfaction.
Exactly. When your inside sales agents feel supported, they're more likely to go above and beyond for customers, leading to more sales and loyalty.
It's like a chain reaction. One good thing leads to another. And it all ties back to communication, doesn't it?
Absolutely. When you create a culture of open communication and empathy, agents feel comfortable sharing their challenges and getting the support they need. This, in turn, helps them connect with customers on a deeper level, build stronger relationships, and navigate tricky situations with more grace and resilience.
This deep dive has been so insightful. I'm looking at inside sales communication in a whole new light.
Remember, communication is an ongoing process. Keep experimenting with these techniques. Get feedback from your team and refine your strategies based on what works best for your unique environment.
Absolutely. I'm excited to put it all into practice. And I'm sure our listeners are too. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Don't forget the human element in all of this. By building genuine connections, both within your team and with your customers, you'll create positive changes that ripple throughout your entire business.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
It was my pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, keep those requests coming. We love exploring new research and finding those actionable insights that can help you level up your skills and achieve even greater success. Until next time, happy communicating.